and welcome back to the Resilience Institute podcast today for episode 8 of season 2. And I just got off the podcast with none other than Angus Bradley, the GPP king, the godfather of general physical preparation. If you know either of us, you know exactly how this chat went. We talked about anything and everything. We went into gait, human movement models. We went into general physical preparation, biopsychosocial, and the difference between biopsycho and social and how they all link together. We went over social media, marketing, branding, the state of the industry at the moment, some certain figures in the industry and what we think of them. We basically talked about everything. There was a million tangents in there, and again, Angus is a wealth of knowledge and always explains things very well and very simply. We went into all the different things about training and stuff. So enjoy the chat. On my side, Pain Quiz is coming extremely soon. So keep an eye out for that on my Instagram. So it is a calculator. So much effort and research and study has gone into this to make this as accurate and legit as possible. You complete the quiz, takes a few minutes, and it will tell you the exact cause of your ache, injury, pain, or whatever for free, and then give you a plan to go away and fix it, and a step-by-step practical plan to implement to fix the problem you have. Then solo templates. Again, it's a no-brainer. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. It is $17 for 12 weeks of premium, proper quality training, using all the systems I've used with my elite international athletes and NRL players, the long drive pros, all the same progressions, exercises, all the same stuff I've used with them, just in different ways to achieve different goals. So $17 for 12 weeks of training on a proper app that EPL, NBA, NFL, all those big teams, the All Blacks, they use this app. Exercise demos, there's a group chat. You can upload exercise demos, ask questions for $17 for 12 weeks. So go and check that out. Again, if you go and pick one, use it, and you hate it, I'll send you your money back. I haven't had anyone yet, but let's say you're the 1% or 0.001%, I'll give you your money back. So go and try it. Pain Quiz coming soon. Go check the solo templates. I'll leave Angus's links in the show notes and all my links. But other than that, enjoy the chat. It was an elite one. And if you've got any questions, let me know and I can help out. Thank you for finally joining me and getting on the potty.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. You're one of my favorite content creators, and sorry about ghosting you on the previous podcast.
Yeah, what happened there? Do you want to tell everyone about it? About the situation?
Yeah, so I scheduled the podcast for the day after my birthday because I never celebrate my birthdays, usually because I don't have anything to celebrate, especially through the bulk of my 20s. Didn't want to celebrate another year passing and just spinning my wheels career-wise. But I finally opened myself up after being pestered by my partner to actually celebrating my birthday, having some people around for drinks, and I woke up with the worst hangover I've ever had in my life. So I was even going about, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be ready for that podcast in the morning, in bed by 2 a.m., still room to get 7 hours of sleep. I was doing the mental numbers and then, just slept through that alarm and woke up feeling like I was like literally poisoned.
Oh, 'cause like I was saying, I was sitting there with Mitch and it was just like, no, he's coming. He's going to hop on it. And it was like 5 minutes and 10 minutes. No, he's still coming. And it was like 15. So I was like, okay, maybe he's not coming. I'll just reschedule this. And you sent the voicemail. Oh, fuck. It was so funny.
I was in a state.
But for people who don't know you, obviously, a lot of my followers will, and your followers listening to this will know a bit about you. But you started, obviously, you were the band story. Like, I know the rough story of how you got into it, but for people who don't know, how did you even get into all of this GPP and all this shit posting on Instagram? What was the journey?
I grew up in a very sporting household. I have an older sibling. He's 2 years older than me. My brother Oscar is a phenomenal, say, world-class endurance athlete, especially throughout our youth. I grew up training variously, but it was by the adjunct of mum and dad were always preaching 50% on the body and 50% on the mind. Thing is, I got shoved into the role of being the smart one because I was shit at every single sport. So I didn't really have ambitions to be like, oh, I want to try that sport. I want to try that sport. It was just following my brother into training for other sports that he had just decided to go into and dominate. My whole story was, I was the smart one by default. I was going to be the first member of my extended family to ever go to university. I still remember the day I came in and told my parents proudly I was going to go be a lawyer when I wanted to grow up, and saw the look in their eyes. I was like, all right, that's the thing that sort of makes them proud. I ended up going into journalism because I had a pretty keen interest in that. I'd always loved writing, both like creatively and just sort of writing in general
Mm.
and expressing myself through the written word. Even had toyed with the idea of potentially being an author middle through high school. I got 2 to 3 years into my journalism degree. I really struggled with the university setting. Probably got a bit, I think I'm a bit neurodivergent. I haven't been diagnosed though, so I don't really want to go into
Welcome
that
to
too
the
much.
crew,
But
brother.
I think there's
Welcome.
potentially some signs there, sort of thing. Really struggled at uni. At this time, my band was getting a lot of momentum, and I came to the realization that a journalist, it's not a protected title. Like, I had no intention of
Mm.
being a newspaper journalist. Ultimately, if you have something to say, you can just go out there and produce
Yeah.
content. And if you're good enough, people pay attention. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, what's the point of finishing this degree? So I left, dropped out in my last semester, just pushed in my chair, walked out of the building, went on tour around the country with my band, realized how many CDs that you actually have to sell to live the
Yeah.
lifestyle that I
What year
actually
was this
wanted
in?
to. 2015 was when we went
Shit,
on
so it's been a
tour.
while now. Yeah, that's mad.
Yeah. Wheels ended up falling off. We sacked our manager. She then tried to sue us for an insane sum of money. I don't want to get into the band shit
Yeah,
happened.
yeah,
Our
yeah.
singer perjured himself and couldn't end up going to court in the end. Had
Yeah.
to settle for a lot of, so that just left a bad taste in our mouth. The only other consistent thing in my life up until that point had been lifting weights. My brother became a personal trainer actually the
Oh,
year he was the youngest franchise personal trainer in Fitness First history. It was like a couple of
oh
days
shit.
after his 18th birthday, he signed the contract. So as rough as that was for him, I had such a great role model. The first day I set foot in the
Yeah.
gym, I had my brother guiding me as a personal trainer. But just I saw the reaction that mum and dad had when he told him he was going to become a personal trainer. Because at the time it was very much an emerging thing. Like
Mm.
Sis was still alive. Like, this is how far back I'm talking.
Rest in
Mum and dad,
peace.
like, people pay people to tell them how to exercise.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, watch my brother go through that. And like, I was just in love with the gym because it was the first time, like, I felt like I had like control over, like, I'd always wanted to be an athlete. I was like, oh, you can use this thing to improve your physical qualities. And it was just everything to me. But I was sort of in denial about the fact that that's all I wanted to do. Just like,
Yeah.
get into training and stuff like that and do that for a living. But yeah, ultimately that's what I sort of fell into after the whole music thing went to shit, and I just haven't looked back since. I love it. I am obsessed with it. You know how people, the common gripe with personal trainers and physios and stuff like that, they're like, don't you hate it when you go to a party and someone finds out you work in fitness and they're like, oh, how do I fix this part of my body? Like, oh, what's the best quad exercise? It's like, I will be the one who chews their
Bro.
ear off for so fucking long. They're
Yeah.
like, why did I even ask this guy? I didn't
Oh
ask for all this
yeah.
info. Like,
Well, I was talking to Mitch about that, and we were saying like we'll text each other because like if I fly back home or he does or whatever, I like have to stop myself red pilling people because like they'll be like, oh, I did this one an email where I heard someone like I overheard these two CrossFitters talking about like their shoulder. They're like, oh yeah, like I just went and got like some acupuncture and a massage and like that released the fascia, and I was just like there like let me at them. Like it's and that's when you know you like it because you're like, what the fuck? No, that's not right. You like have to pull yourself back. But that's like, and obviously that's why you're doing well is that you do actually fucking enjoy it. You're not just posting to make money. Like and obviously the mentorship and stuff. What
like you were saying before, the stereotype about the laptop lifestyle, people like must be nice. And like, don't get me wrong, I think it is nice, but I went online so I could work harder. Like now my
yeah.
gym doesn't shut because I just open my laptop or my phone and I feel like
And
I'm
also,
working more.
the work you do, it's all you. It's not like that's the thing I hate. And we're talking about the neurodivergent stuff. It's like I like couldn't stand working for someone because I'm like like you almost don't want to bust your ass because you're like I'm not really doing this for me, kind of like it gets to this point. But then how'd you get onto GPP? So obviously you started. What was it like? I was saying I followed you like maybe 2020 or
GPP, the
2021.
program, is exactly a year old, like a year and 2 months old. And what
Yeah,
it is the culmination of is sort of two core values, one coming from the personal trainer side of things and another one coming from the strength and conditioning side of things. So One, I come from a personal training background. I'm a strength and conditioning enthusiast and I love working with athletes. But at the end of the day, I blooded myself by working on the Gen Pop. And it makes me sick to my stomach that we are aware of like all these body image issues and things like that. And like we understand now that our role primarily is to encourage people to engage with health seeking behavior.
Mm.
And we have a consumer base that will always tell us about, no, don't want to be looking like a bodybuilder or anything like that. I want to look athletic. Yet we just give them watered down bodybuilding. And I understand that that is the fastest way to achieve an athletic look. And we are sad. But like as stewards of these people and as stewards and representatives of people who want to drive this industry forward, I'm like, why aren't we creating a product that just encourages health seeking behavior? And my thought is that by encouraging people to train more variously from the get-go, they have a higher likelihood, one, maybe just enjoying training variously. That would be my hope. But it's like a gateway drug. They have a higher likelihood of finding a form of exercise that they resonate with and that they will continue to practice forever. Because ultimately, that's how we get the best results, is we keep people training for life. And the nutrition thing is something separate entirely. It's like most of your aesthetic ideals come from how you eat. And then the training should just be about like, what aspects of physical fitness do you enjoy exploring? I also have a huge passion for S&C, and I have a great desire. My impact there, I want to be making people realize that you're not a track coach, you're not a powerlifting coach, you're not a swimming coach. You're coaching humans first and foremost. So there's so much fucking overlap, especially from a strength and conditioning perspective there. And not only should S&C look mostly the same for 90% of athletes. Like, yeah, there should be a bit of specificity mixed in there, but 90% just training general qualities. But also the coaches themselves, like again, these, I learned so many things that I've applied to my technical model for weightlifting, not from weightlifting coaches, but by going out and talking to track coaches. That's how I sort of started to move away from being like, oh, every weightlifter needs to fully triple extend. Otherwise, their technique's inefficient. Or like, again, in weightlifting, no one could reconcile for me why knees move in towards the midline on a squat, or why we experience the double knee bend in the second pull of weightlifting. And yet, if you talk to some PRI people or some of these gait nerds, they hate lifting weights. They're allergic to barbells, but none of them would be surprised about knees moving medially on a squat. None of them are confused by this double knee bend in the second pull of a clean. They're like, yeah, mid propulsion, duh. Like, and so like, if we just get outside the fucking silo, and so that's sort of the sum of sort of GPP, just encouraging people to train variously, and then all the amazing things that come off the back of that.
Yeah, and like you said, like with I was talking to was it Jamie, or I listened to a podcast, but they're explaining how like you were saying, like you got track coaches, you got this coach and that coach, and everyone's like, oh, it must be like a track coach will say, oh, it's because they're not doing this. Whatever coach says, oh, because they're not strong here. But and there was some stat or something where they were saying like the highest elite, most well-paid athletes all have a biomedical focus in their training. So like it was a pain thing I watched. So it's like the pain, everyone knows, we'll talk about it. Biopsychosocial, it's the subjective, it's not one or the other. Your subjective impacts your objective, etc. But all the highest paid, most elite things, it's all biomedical. It's so you look at like, oh yeah, we're helping pain or injuries with your mums, your dads, your whatever. But they're the ones who actually almost, it's easier to do, because at the top level, it's all like, no, it has to be this, it has to be that. And this is obviously where your models things come in, and you're big on models. And I when you came on and did the chat for the mentorship, it was, everyone just went, and even I was like, oh yeah, there's points I didn't even think it. Like, so what model, if you can explain models so we can feed into that, like there's no bio, there's no like psycho and all this stuff. Where did you, if you can explain models, give a bit about it and like how you use it into GPP. So we'll be here for a couple of hours just on this point.
That's a really great, quite a deep question. Reality is too complex for us to perceive. So we must layer models over the top of it to help us just pay attention to certain things. And a lot of people will say, you know, this thing like all models are wrong, some are useful. I think that George Box quote. And I think the rhetoric that I was seeing in my social media bubble is people just criticizing the use of models and saying that, oh, this model's bullshit because it's just made up. all models are made up.
Yeah.
Again, specifically in the human movement context, people, this compression expansion model, it's just made up. I'm like, what? You think God came down to Moses and delivered him like the sagittal plane and the frontal plane and the trans? It's like, no, some people just find it really useful to think about like, okay, so a human can move in so many different ways, but you can kind of crudely boil it down to forwards and backwards movement, side to side movement, and then these rotational based movements. But then you have this other lens where, Bill Hartman and I align with his view. I'm like, I actually find it a lot easier to look at all movement through the transverse plane, and everything just sort of rides off the back of that. It appears that there's these patterns, humans move in pattern 1 and pattern 2, or this wind up pattern, and then this propulsive pattern of, the wind up seems to be characterized by flexion, abduction, external rotation. To me, that's all just external rotation. And then the propulsive pattern is extension, adduction, internal rotation, or the way I view it is just internal rotation. That sort of translates breathing to gait. Anyway, circling back to models, because we can go down this compression expansion rabbit hole whenever. Ultimately, how you come up with a training model that like suits your needs and solves the problems in front of you is not by taking one other model. It's by taking, again, you're understanding your own worldview and looking deeper within yourself as a person. Be like, what are some things that I just think are universally true of the world? Like when people talk about a principle-driven approach, I feel like they're too quick to look for fitness principles. It's like there are like global principles that underpin your worldview, things that ways you've always felt about the world. And that is the sieve through which you then strain through all these either medical models or fitness models. And by doing all of those and sort of bastardizing them and trying to peer through as many of them as you can simultaneously, that is how you end up with something that one is unique, but that's not the point. The point is that it needs to be a unique model because you have a unique personal context which you operate in, and you solve problems for a unique group of people, and you need a model that meets your needs. So essentially I've just been straining through other models. And I guess if I had to sum it up, like it depends what aspect of what we do you're talking about as far as which models I find most useful. From a purely human movement perspective, it really is like compression expansion model.
Yeah, more like your GPP.
But then again, like it does relate to like dynamic systems theory and the biopsychosocial. It overlaps with that. But again, like big sort of global models that I look through, again, you can't really go past like anti-fragile principles that, again, they overlap so much with biopsychosocial concepts and dynamic systems theory concepts. Like I see those as almost inseparable, the way that they exist in my mind. And essentially what all three of those models that I most recently mentioned sort of tell me, and where they align with my worldview, is that things are always complex, multifactorial, and we should try to not predict things too much. Because I have a personal thing where I hate being wrong. And I've realized if you stop trying to predict things, you are wrong less. And that feeds into my ego. So I'm not sure if that's healthy or not yet, but that's sort of where I'm at with all of these models and reconciling a lot of it in my head. And
especially with your GPP, like let's say where someone's listening to this, like an athlete or even a coach who's trying to understand that the body isn't a machine and all this stuff. How would you explain what are the key principles, let's say training wise? We'll save the biopsychosocial chat for a bit later, but let's say GPP, someone's listening going, okay, well, what is Angus trying to achieve here with GPP? What movements is he trying to get people to do that they're missing and that kind of stuff? Like I know it's so hard, again, it's complex, but like your generalized principles or models in terms of training you're trying to help people with for the coaches and the athletes here are trying to move better, feel better.
Just that there are very general physical qualities, right? And there are specific means that we can select between to acquire said physical qualities. But despite the infinite methods you can use to acquire these general physical qualities, everything essentially boils down to getting stronger.
But the interference effect.
Get into new positions. Well, and this is the thing. I think this was something that Evan Peacon helped me realize, and then later Alex Viada, much more crudely and strongly, in a very friendly way. But it was sort of like Evan Peacon was talking about like energy systems, the way we learn about them in a textbook. They're all neatly in these little boxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a big one.
First I was annoyed, but then It was like, he was like, nah, it makes sense, right? If you know nothing about it, you require a reductionist and simplified explanation. You can't just immediately off the bat be like, all right, so there's all these different energy systems, but guess what? You're never really just biasing one. It's always all of them running concurrently over the top of one.
Well, I used to think that as well. Yeah.
We all
when I learned it.
Because again, the way you depict it in a textbook, it's so hard to illustrate that complexity on a textbook page. It requires you to, again, just sit with it and to, dig a little bit deeper. And so it was that, but then also just chatting to Alex Viada, because again, he was a big inspiration. I'm like, man, this guy deadlifts 700 pounds, 320 kilos. He's running ultras and things like that. I got him on the podcast. I was like, mate, you're the godfather of hybrid training. How'd you work it out? Like, everyone was talking about the interference effect, and you just broke out of the group thinking. He was like, mate, I was training fucking rugby players. Like, what do you mean? They were running around heaps and they were jacked. Like, there was nothing to work out. It was just in front of me. I was like, fuck's sake. Like, it was in front of all of us. Like, there was just so much groupthink. Like, and that's what I find interesting, like, about the fitness industry. It's like the amount of groupthink. I feel like a conspiracy theorist sometimes, because it's such a conspiracy theorist sounding thing to say. Be like, man, it's right. Open your eyes, man. It's right in front of you. It's happening all around us. But again, like, the interference. It
literally is,
And that was literally one of the biggest examples I can point to of just groupthink in an industry, because you could go up to any personal trainer. Let's go 5 years ago, before this sort of rhetoric got popular, and you'd be like, you've seen football players before, like big muscly guys with good aerobic systems, and they'd be like, yeah, heaps.
They're like, yeah, literally. Or even CrossFitters, like, they're fucking strong, jacked, fit, fast. And I went to an Australian strength coach seminar like 2019.
Hell yeah.
And that's when I was trying to do my bench press. Bro, I had no idea. Like, it actually cringes me to look back on my training. I got 165 bench, so I did well.
Bench.
But bro, I could have got, I'm going to say 250 just for the exaggeration, but I could have got so much more. Bro, he's a very, and Andrew Locke unfollowed me because I talk so much shit to him all the time. Mm-hmm. But I followed percentage based. You have to, I followed all his rules. He had hypertrophy first, then strength, then power. So I had these blocks of, okay, I have to do hypertrophy first at 75%. That means I'm going to have to do this weight. And I was calculating.
Basic potentiation.
Bro, and I would walk in there feeling fucked and tired, but I'd be like, I have to hit this 92%. I have to hit this 95%. And I'd just be like, what? Why am I so sore? And why am I not getting stronger? And now I'm like, that Interstellar meme where he's looking through the thing? That was me. I look back, I'm like, hey, just don't press too heavy today. You'll be fine. And it's like, it's just, and it is a good shift.
Here's the thing, and it ties back into sort of what you were talking about with, like, a lot of the best athletes in the world having, or at least operating under, with the guidance they're receiving, very much a biomedical lens. The biopsychosocial is all happening, whether you acknowledge it or not.
Yeah.
And this is something I was sort of talking about with John Kiley, because again, a lot of traditional periodization theory, where thoughts, beliefs, expectations, environmental factors weren't acknowledged. It was very like body as a machine driven ideas, emerged from a society where it's representative of the society it emerged from as well. Because in Russia, do you think you thought, not Russia, the USSR back in the 50s and 60s, do you think that the thoughts, beliefs, and expectations were acknowledged? And the byproduct of that is like, while they're still having an impact on outcomes, it's probably muted, because I would say they probably are a bit more of a stoic society in general. And maybe they are operating a little bit more machine-like, or at least like when you're working with a professional athlete where you're controlling where they sleep, what they eat, and when they see their family, yes, a lot of these things actually do start to function slightly more like a machine. Or from your perspective, because you grew up, I imagine, like similar to I didn't have too hard of a childhood. Hope I'm not speaking out of turn.
Literally.
Like I had great parents. You going in there being like, I need to do this. I am a rigid machine. It is the day I need to hit 92%. It's like, that's you, but BPSing yourself and being like, I am a fucking machine. Like, And this is where I go to as well. Like, Bill Hartman said this. He's like, a model being accurate is no indication of its usefulness. Being, and this is the interesting thing.
I've heard that before, actually.
Biopsychosocial thing. Does more complex and nuanced understanding of pain make it easier to solve, or did we just move the goalposts? And this is not me criticizing it, because again, I think we're moving forward by being like, oh, we don't fix pain. You know, you have episodes and we have tactics to sort of maybe alleviate some of those symptoms in the short run, but it's about sort of managing expectations around pain as well. Now, that's been a big part of it. Now that we understand that the body's not a machine, it's like, oh, fuck, this pain thing's really complex. So like, yeah. and it's just to finish off the metaphor, that because it was the best example I heard in my life. Bill Hartman, very smart man. He was like, think of a map of America. You've never been to America and you're going on a road trip. Do you want a realistic and accurate depiction of America on your map? No. Think about the way they depict a highway on a map. If it was drawn to if it was the scale at which it's drawn, the highway would be like 20 miles wide. Whereas if it was drawn to scale, you'd have to whip out a magnifying glass to see it. So models are used to cut the noise and to highlight certain aspects of the system that you need to be paying attention to. Don't get me wrong, still some terrible models out there. But again, it's not about accuracy necessarily. It's about the right model depending on what you're trying to communicate and to whom. Or maybe it's just a model for your own understanding.
Yeah, and and you said the expectation. That's like all it is. It's obviously not all it is, but like even with pain, if you just fucking explain to someone that just because they have pain, it doesn't mean they're damaged or they're going to have to get surgery. I'll have people who I'll have a first consult with. By the end of it, they're like smiling and excited about their journey. And I'm like, I haven't even started the program yet. And then they'll message me the next day and be like, fuck, my back feels actually way better today. Like I'm keen to go to the gym. I'm excited. And I'm like, we have done zero training. We have done zero exercises, load management, nothing. I have just spoken English to you and used this model and briefly explained it. And now you're like, oh, I feel better.
Here's the thing though. I reckon we were all probably biopsycho, relatively, if you're a reasonable person, you're probably a pretty biopsychosocial practitioner before you drank the fitness Kool-Aid for the first time. It was 100% that got you into a biomedical body as a machine thinking. That's where you fucking learned about that. 8-year-old Angus, you're like, hey Angus, you reckon pain's complex? Like, have you ever had any like weird pain and then it just went away? I'd be like, hell yeah. Like, but then I got into the fitness industry, they're like, nah, it's because fucking this thing doesn't externally rotate.
That's actually such a good because you posted that,
As much as people from the pure BPS side, I'm a BPS guy, but there's the BPS zealots, and they'll accuse people of overcomplicating and overly focusing on biomechanics. You, as a BPS fan, I think we have to acknowledge that the BPS model and a lot of the rhetoric around the nuances of it is the most over-intellectualization of just respecting someone as a fucking human. It is literally just, I made a meme about it the other day. It's just literally about being like, hey, mate, hey, not Mr. Low Back Injury. Hayden, what's your Hayden? I'm gonna remember that.
That's
hey,
what
you feel good in this room. This is a nice place to hang out. Like, hey, what matters to you about this injury? Like, oh, is that all? That because that's literally what it fucking is.
Because
so many. You've got the polite word is we've got so many neurodivergent people in this industry that we need to develop a specific model to explain to them all this stuff.
But like that, I was gonna say that's the post I saw. Is you were like, what people think the biopsychosocial model is, and it's like this, and at the end of the day is, hey, how was your day? How are you feeling today?
BPS model is like, are you a good bloke? Like, do you see people as human beings? Like,
I think,
like, no, you're doing an inactive model. I'm like, oh, you're, and like, yes, it should be an inactive model with no separation between the B, the P, and the S. But the way you can simplify that is like, are you a good person who people want to be around and they trust and they literally has their best interest at heart? It's like, cool, you're BPS'd up to the tits.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is you don't have to explain the whole biopsychosocial model. Like I educate my clients so they have an understanding. So when I say things, they're like, oh, okay, I understand why. But it's not like you're trying to explain this and that. It's more just so they understand at the end of the day, if they do a raise and they lift their shoulder a bit, that's not causing their pain.
Dude, the first person, but this is the thing, any of your clients who are paying you a decent rate probably work a job that's complex enough that they'll understand exactly what you're saying. Because like I'm always looking at it. I love economics. It was my favorite subject in high school. And it was actually my economics teacher, Mr. Smith, who introduced me to like biopsychosocial thinking. He didn't describe it as the biopsychosocial model, and this was back in 2008. got lucky. I studied economics at like a really exciting time. And he was talking about like the effects of the stimulus package on the economy. He's like, it's like everyone's struggling for money and like you give them cash and you're like, all right, so they should spend it, knowing logically they should spend it on food, put a bit off the mortgage, maybe stick a bit away in savings because there's a lot of economic fluctuations, things are unpredictable. But he was like, class, there's no such thing as the rational economic man. When stress is high, you give people money to put off their mortgage. They go out and they spend it on booze and cigarettes.
Buy a fucking TV,
they need creature comforts. They're like, oh my God, the world's ending. Just like, give me a ciggy and a beer. Like, fuck saving for the future. And like, again, like and that is, again, why economic behavior isn't that predictable. And again, which goes over to the other person that both me and you put on a pedestal, Nassim Taleb. He hates the evidence-based or data-driven aspect of economic forecasting the same way I hate the quantitative data-driven aspect of sports science.
But I love that, man.
You can't boil these things down to a data point.
But yeah, the way he explains it all. But I think also the only time I would probably say educating on it is helpful is to then not for people, but for other coaches who are like, no, don't flex your spine, don't rotate at this. So that's probably one where I would say that's where you do need to kind of go down that complexity but even still, you don't even really need to. You don't have to go real complex. It's just explaining what the biopsychosocial model is in general. But I think that's the biggest thing is that people, and this is what you see now, obviously pendulum swing. It's like bio, psycho, and social. And all of a sudden people are just like, no, it's psychosocial. And that's where I'm at now. And it triggers me. It's like, people are like, nah, don't worry, just do the exercise whatever way you want. Or nah, bend your back whatever way you want. Or nah, and I'm like, it's called fucking biopsychosocial.
Yeah. I'm trying to target stress at tissues to some extent. Like I'm not saying you blow your back out if you flex your spine on an RDL. And like I know it's impossible to RDL and hip hinge without flexing your spine. Yeah. But I'm like, I would like most of the movement about the hips. And I think if you can't get that out of your client,
don't say that. It's psychosocial.
Might be a bit of a shit coach. And here's the thing, right? Like, because you also have to respect the world that we live in. And like you're saying, like sometimes we work in an allied health model. We might be working forced into a situation where in an allied health model situation with someone who is operating in that lens, and you need to be good enough with that B. And obviously we know it's never the B in isolation to like try to draw as much P and S out of their use of the B as possible. And like things where I've found the B particularly helpful, because again, my belief is you don't interact with any of them in isolation. You're always interacting with all three simultaneously. I've had people come into me and they're like, my physio told me I'm quad dominant. I'm never going to be good at this activity because I'm quad dominant. You can use your knowledge of the B. In this sense, it's more biomechanics than biology as a whole. Again, still the B part of it. Give that person the glute contraction of their fucking life. And then you're changing their perception of themselves. You're changing how they perceive and can move through their environment. Like there is a huge PS side to the B. And like I said, the model falls apart as soon as you try to either reject or isolate any one part of it. And there's so many annoying people on both sides because biomedical people who haven't accepted this BPS thing at all, they're like, oh, it's all thoughts, beliefs, and feelings and stuff like that. And then you have other BPS zealots who will chastise people for talking about B without any PS context, yet will always talk about PNS. And I know they've been underemphasized for so long, but I'm like, people need it contextualized for them, especially if you are trying to be a fucking educator or something like that. It's like, give people the full picture. Let's just not swing the pendulum completely the other way, which is a hard thing to do. And like, I've been guilty of swinging pendulums hard just for the sake of like, I'm just trying to get the conversation and the momentum heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
I understand that, but I think we've been sort of wrestling with this concept for long enough now where I'm like, let's actually bring this thing into the middle where again, it is truly a biopsychosocial approach.
Well, even with the you're saying the quad dominant thing, all you have to do is use like, all you've got to do is change the way they set up the exercise, change their constraints. And I get like, it's like my most common like first message is like, I've never felt my glutes like that. I'm like, nah, you couldn't have. You're quad dominant. They're like, they start laughing. And all of a sudden they're like, wow. Like, so it's having that knowledge to be like, okay, they might think they are, they might have been told they are, but you can with the B and the biomechanics change the constraint or something next does a tiny bit, and they're like, my glutes are frying, I can't walk. And it's like, but so many people want to keep it.
Fucking skills. Like the way I look at like why I need people to be deliberate to some extent with their movement in the gym is like ultimately I'm trying to show them all the variety of ways they can express human movement. And when people move like shit, what I look at that is a lot of their movement is unintentional. I'm asking them to perform a certain task in a certain way to drive certain physical qualities. And a lot of them just can't do that. And again, it's up to me as the coach to constrain the environment so they can start behaving how I'd like them to. But yeah, it's a very valuable thing, I think, to increase someone's physical capacity, whether it's to move through space in a way that they couldn't before. Like, and again, the only way to do that is to be deliberate to some extent with how you move.
Yeah.
So I just don't see like movement optimism is great up until you need movement optimism, right? Because so many people are just afraid of how they move. Once you're no longer got this neurotic fear of movement, I'm honestly not sure what movement optimism has to offer. Again, I am a movement optimist, but I just see so many people celebrate and lifting like shit. They're weak as piss. And again, I don't want those people to feel insecure and be like, oh no, I'm not going to engage with exercise now. But like,
and that's what's hard about it.
An idea that's awesome can be taken too far. And like I said, it's not all movement optimists, it's just some annoying.
That's what's fucking hard about it.
And you're like, oh, I've learned that there's no such thing as bad movement, so I'm just going to be like lazy as a coach. Again, that's not most people.
Yeah. And so with GPP, obviously we're talking about some of your business stuff as well. And how are you, and you're talking about you starting your marketing and stuff. How are you now trying to get that out to people, and how are you trying to, or where do you see GPP going? Like now that you're known for this, like now how are you trying to get it out there and speak to people and stuff and market it?
Initially it was just sort of like me sharing my values on training and how I thought it would be cool for a lot of people to train both athletes and Gen Pop. But then it sort of collided with the education side of my business. Now I sort of like the idea. Initially I was like, not my monkeys, not my circus. Like I'm not going to get into certification or anything like that. But Jacob's sort of been encouraging me. It's like, man, it should have a GPP Cert 3 and 4. And initially I was like, yuck. I would hate to sort of, work with the bodies that sort of certify those sorts of things. But then I was just like, and this is a bit narcissistic, I was like, who else do you trust to do a better job than you of coming up with a Cert 3 and 4 curriculum to push this GPP propaganda and like give Gen Pop the experience that I think they deserve to have with their first taste of exposure to fitness, and give athletes the training that they deserve. And I was like, all right, don't be a pussy. Like you actually have to step up and try to accomplish this. So yeah, that's ultimately what it is. I want you to be able to train variously with GPP. I want you to be able to wear a variety of sick garments, like representing the GPP brand and ethos. I want you to be able to educate yourself as a GPP trainer. And that is how we're going to have the biggest impact on this industry. Because the trickle down impact ultimately through education is bigger than the one through training, because when you're educating trainers, you get 40, 50 clients at a time, like training and spreading the propaganda like that, rather than just any individual that comes. But then what GPP exists at, like that's the way that I love to train, and that's sort of the initial momentum and like just this initial hub and community to drive this thing. And then in terms of the strategy, it's primarily a social media driven strategy. I think my initial content strategy with Angus Bradley, my main page, was just sort of speaking about whatever struck me that day that I thought was important to hear about. But now I have a much more deliberate sort of propaganda model with the GPP Instagram page. There is very much dedicated what I look at as a 3-funnel system: top funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. Top funnel is like I make you laugh and make you realize GPP exists. Maybe I teach you something. Middle funnel content, mostly education based or really inside jokes to keep the community engaged. And then obviously the bottom funnel isn't that interesting because it's just a series of calls to action and stuff like that. But that's sort of the operation as it stands.
What are you going to do with the seminar? Well, not the seminar, the accreditation. So what are you planning there?
This is like, don't keep an eye out for your GPP Cert 3 and 4. This is like literally a 5 to 10 year plan.
That's cool. That's cool.
Next 2 years though, there is going to be a lot of like GPP education. There will be a platform for that. Just no one else is doing it. Someone's got to fucking do it. Sorry, I actually G'd up and excited to do this. I'm just being like, I'm like, where is the GPP? Like, I was always kind of G'd up about GPP, but I've even had people be like, oh, what does GPP mean? Like, did you make it up? I'm like, no, GPP has been a thing for fucking ever.
Bro, I'm surprised at that because everyone goes like, no, you have to do sports specific training, and like, no, general training doesn't do anything. I'm surprised people don't know what it is. Like, that's the thing that coaches get off on, saying, oh, I do specific preparation. Look at this specific drill.
It's because everyone got told they needed to niche. And it's just a fucking psyop. Everyone fucking roped off 90% of the market from themselves because some business coach told them to niche. And it's like, nah, you just need to like be who you are, and you are the niche.
Yeah, literally. And actually, that's one of the things, especially with like even the pain stuff. It's like, let's say there are people doing GPP and training. They're fucking boring. It's like
people would look at you and be like, Hayden, you should be like, come up with a niche like, I help busy mums of two get out of right SI joint pain.
Yeah, literally. Like all my thing is like my niche is literally just turning pain into performance. Yeah. Obviously, I primarily work with guys who are 25 to 40, and they're the actual ones who.
Oh, and there will naturally be a more specific person that you attract.
But
you do not have to announce that or constrain yourself to that.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, but it's also like for your GPP example, even my pain thing, it's like there might be a couple of people out there doing it, but they're like you were saying, they go so complex into it because they're trying to show off that they know it. And then there's no like humor or engagement. There's not people. So there's probably are heaps of GPP people out there, but no one knows because they're like just doing boring posts, not chatting shit, and they're too afraid to say anything. You know what I mean? Whereas here you are fucking slinging off shit posting and calling people out that people like, oh, GPP exists, and then it ends up being this fucking thing. You kind of just...
I feel bad for S&C coaches who behave really politely on social media because they think it'll get them jobs. No one was going to pay for your opinion.
That is not professionalism.
There's a fucking doormat.
Yeah.
I've been slandering everyone from day dot, and I cannot tell you how many pro sports organizations I have worked with in sports that I just have never even thought about. Like,
yeah, but what do you think all the sports people do at training when they fucking talk to each other? They swear, they talk shit.
Yeah.
Like people say, oh, professionalism is not. I get people sometimes, like mums and dads. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, have you ever considered like not swearing in your post so like more of a younger audience can see it? And I'm like, no, like. Then I just end up not like all the people who want to follow me and talk to me are like, oh, this guy's a bit boring.
Can't afford shit.
Yeah, they can't. They're not paying my bills. They're not supporting my fucking dog. They're not paying her dinner. And it's like, but then it's like, then you end up just going away from who you want to work with. Because then all those people are like, imagine if you stop swearing and shit posting. Everyone would be like...
This is the thing as well. People like, I'm burnout. I can't handle any more clients. Like, don't get me wrong. I have a very small roster of one-to-one clients, but so I can free myself up for other aspects of the business. But it's like, yeah, no wonder you put on this act, you attract a bunch of sociopaths because you're out there acting like a sociopath online. Like, no real people talk like how a lot of people tell you to behave on social media. It's like, all of a sudden, be your authentic self, attract like-minded people, going to work feels frictionless, creating content feels frictionless because there is nothing worse than constructing a fake persona that ultimately gets rejected. So you went out of your way to make up something that wasn't a representation of your true self, and it still wasn't good enough. Versus even if your true self's getting rejected, you're like, oh, well, you know, congrats to me for putting myself out there. What you find, though, is being your true self 100% of the time always comes across better.
Yeah, but this is, and I explain this to some of my mentoring clients, even some of my clients or people I talk to. It's like, let's say these are two people. This is you normally, and this is your like persona. This person swears and shits on stretching, foam rolling. This person doesn't, is polite. 50% are going to like this person, 50% are going to like this person. If you swap to the other person, you're not going to get everyone who likes you. The people are just going to switch.
Yeah.
And now, but you end up like, if someone's going to not fucking like it, so you may as well just fucking like, even here, I'm swearing on a podcast from I'm an exercise physiologist and like we're meant to be professional, but it's like, that's not real. It's like, again, the biopsychosocial thing. It's like, you want to actually be likable.
And that's the thing, like you can be very abrasive, and I'm always really grateful for how abrasive and aggressive I have been at times in my communication. And like, it really took me until I hit over 20K followers before I was getting any sort of consistent hate. I wouldn't even call it hate. It's just a few salty characters in the
Yeah.
comments section, like once every blue
It's like
moon.
that.
But like, yeah, you can be a pretty negative Nancy out there, and people are still just like, hell yeah, because Instagram, that whole the medium is the message cliche, which is so true.
Yeah.
Instagram just naturally pushes you into this gorgeous echo chamber once you get it firing, and like, I think a lot of evidence-based people are like, no, you got to challenge your biases and stop posting in your echo chamber. I'm like, well, yeah, like. But that's not how social media works. And if you want to have an impact, you have to formulate some aspect of an echo chamber. Like if you want to like challenge your biases and stuff like that, go into academic writing, but none of them were smart enough for that. So,
And half of those coaches, it's like that reel you put up with the where you're teaching the snatch, I think it was. I guarantee you, those coaches were only shitting on you. You don't see, I don't know this weightlifting world, but let's say Sonny Webster, him. He's not on your post going, fuck, that sucks. No,
yeah,
blah,
he's doing
blah.
his own stuff. And me and Sonny Webster have quite diametrically opposed for within weightlifting, quite opposing views on a lot of the key topics there. But again, Sonny is focused on Sonny.
Exactly. All the coaches who are going at you are the people who, A, aren't going to buy anything off you anyway, but are the people who deep down are just like, oh, fuck, like he's getting all these views and he's doing seminars, so I'm just going to critique him. I saw those comments and I was just like, oh, I couldn't. Oh, and that was one of the only times I've seen you actually go back at people. Usually you just leave them, and you were like, no, send me the one where you like send me your roster and I'll send me your email. I'll give you my clients. I was like, fuck, that was funny. And that's just you being yourself as well.
I still get such a kick out of because I was always a skinny guy at the first gym I went to. I'd want to have an opinion on something, and I wouldn't get hate. I get no one even engaging or
listening.
Like, what did that skinny guy say? What the fuck does he know about any of this shit? Whereas now to be like a skinny bloke and be like, oh, I don't know if you need a deload all the time. And all these big roided up guys like, what the fuck did she say? Like, oh, do you feel obligated? Even when Kassem was like, I got to debate this guy, I was like, wait,
you're picking me?
Thinks that he needs to address things that I said.
Literally,
I had to start fanning myself immediately. I was like,
because when I got that
hypertrophy guru.
When I got that first hate on that, I was talking about the Prime Train one.
Yes.
The fact I was getting people hate me was like, oh, cool. People actually listen to me and value what I'm saying, and they're not happy. I was like, fuck it. Like, obviously, back then it was a year and a half ago. I was like, no, like I do this, and now I'm just like, fuck it. I don't care. I just pull the grenade, throw it, and get off TikTok. But back then I was like, no, like, and now you just realize like people are gonna fucking shit on you no matter what you do or say. So it's like,
I'm a bit of a toxic person. I hate on people just for putting themselves out there and trying. It's just that no one should give a fuck what I think about that and just do it.
Yeah.
Like, generally I try to support people and stuff. I see shit. I'm like, man, fuck that guy's content. But yeah, I'm also like, I like how he doesn't care that I don't think he should be posting.
Yeah. Oh, mate. It's such a fucking shit. Like the whole social media scene is a fucking shit fire.
And my thing is, like, I always try to set an example, and I always try to encourage. Everyone always talks about the trainers at the peak of Mount Stupid, but I don't think we talk enough about all the trainers in the Valley of Despair. The trainers in the Valley of Despair, the ones who are uncertain, those are the ones that I want to push to make content. And because it is a contradiction when I think about, for lack of a better word, fixing this industry, like where our biggest communication streams are hijacked by the most charismatic and overconfident people. Whereas it's the people who are full of doubt and uncertainty because they're all the people who are closer to correct and pushing more good info. It's like, but it's such a contradiction to then get those people to put themselves out there. I'm like, how do we solve that? And that's a lot of sort of what I push in my mentorship and things like that. But I think it is one of the biggest things we need to overcome from a communication and a learning standpoint in this industry. Just like, how do we empower people who doubt themselves to still share openly on socials?
Yeah, and the Seedman thing's the best example. Like, if he can confidently post the shitty post, I'm 100% convinced it's a front. Like, I don't think he actually believes in any of that shit. I'm almost talk about conspiracy theories.
The brother's the Seed.
Oh, really? Who's the brother?
Josh Seedman.
No, what's the rabbit hole?
Have you ever asked yourself on? I don't know if it's his default pick now, but for years there was another man in the photo. And on his website, there's another man in the photo. And I was like, who's this other guy? Was it like former business partner and stuff like that? So turns out Joel Seedman's brother Josh is like a Mensa level genius. He went to Harvard on a full scholarship. His main thing isn't fitness. They were like called the Muscle Brothers when they were doing stuff in college together or something. You can read this. It's all on their websites. Like they've got an about Joel and they've got an about Josh sort of section. So Joel after uni was like, all right, don't have time for this fitness stuff because I'm a super genius. He's out there in like mergers, not mergers and acquisitions. You know, those companies. He works for the companies where you buy a company that's a multi-million dollar multinational corporation, but it's on a bit of a downward spiral. You take over it, you make it more efficient, you get it profitable again, you take a big chunk of the money with you, and then you sell it for more than what you got it for. Joel Seedman's brother does that. So he's obviously just such a genius and a business and marketing mind that he handles all that side of things for Joel, or at least got the ball rolling for him. So Josh is actually the one to blame.
Really? So he doesn't actually believe in that shit?
I don't know. I don't know, because what the things that I can't comprehend about the situation is how you study a PhD and land on 90-degree eccentric isometrics. And that's also why I love Joel, because I'm like, it's just
I wish I had the balls to do that.
Saying the same shit. I'm just like, Joel's not a threat to my business necessarily, right? He creates. I love Joel. No, sorry, Joel is not useful to me because he's too ridiculous to call out. I actually find it strange that people are so engaged with. And I'm like, the solution with Joel Seedman, you all have to look away. You can't reason with that because it's too crazy. You have to. Whereas, like, when I see someone who's like halfway down the rabbit hole, I can go and debate with them.
Even Prime Train, for example.
100%. I would have a much higher likelihood of having a productive conversation with Prime Train. Whereas me and Joel Seedman have diametrically opposing worldviews. So it's not his views on fitness that I need to change. That's not as hard as people make out. It's actually his worldview that I need to change. And I'm not his parent. And I don't want to go there and be his daddy. So...
It's not the fucking
take me on. He's got bigger arms than me. Here's the other thing. Joel Seedman and Squat You. Joel Seedman is way more jacked than
I forgot about Squat You.
And I'm done living in a world where I don't want to acknowledge how stacked Joel Seedman is. He's a manlet, so it's a bit easy to be stacked, but he's low key stacked. I don't know
how.
He's just a stud. I don't know what to tell you. No,
he must do one.
So I don't know if he's a stud.
He must do one exercise for the piss take, and he's like, "Yep, wrap it up." And then he just goes, does his GPP program. He does his lifts, and he has to. There's no way. Well, we know you can't get fucking big like that. Here's the other
thing: Squat You clean and jerked 150. I've only done 140.
Fuck. So technically, now you have to listen to what he says.
He also noceboed himself and like still overcame that.
What did he do?
Oh, just with his own rhetoric about fitness and stuff like that.
Well,
perpetually noceboing himself and into like this sort of glass cage. He has very just objectively gross squat technique. Anyway, sorry.
You look at some of the movements he does, and he's like, push knees out and done him. Okay, let's not even get started.
Practically false grips the bar when he's doing cleans and snatches. He it's like he's literally revving a fucking motorbike. Anyway, fucking list more than me. What do I know?
Yeah, I was about to say. But that actually is a good segue into one of the topics of, let's talk about the squat.
Functional gurus that are actually beasts.
Yeah, literally.
Type of that.
Yeah, literally. But one of the things, again, that you talk about really well, and I wanted to talk about like the gait model and not specifically go as much down into it, but more when we talk about mainly the triple extension and like the myth around that knees in are bad. What's your take on that? And for people who haven't heard about you, because I meant to ask that before, and then we went on this fucking our standard tangent. But yeah, just a little bit about that and why knees in isn't actually what people think it is, because a lot of people are still struggling to accept it almost.
Okay, I don't like to create I have whatever. I'm just gonna say I have rules about this. They're not that harsh rules, but I think there are just like patterns with human movement that apply to a variety of contexts.
Yeah.
And again, this is a belief that I have that very generally speaking, when humans are winding up, there's just this external rotation bias to the movement. And when humans are propelling themselves, things just have this tendency to move in towards the midline. Let's get out of the weight room entirely and let's have a think of an example that jiu-jitsu is very popular now. Everyone's done a 6-month stint. When someone is trying to arm bar you, what are they trying to do? Or kimura you, like some sort of upper limb submission. They are trying to isolate your limb and get it away from your body. Essentially, they are trying to put the system into external rotation where you are less leveraged to produce a lot of force. I view it as more of a wind-up phase, a wind-up or a yielding
thought about it like that.
orientation. So, and how do you defend that? How do you regain control of your arm or maintain control of it? You keep it in close towards your body. So whenever the system is trying to gain leverage to produce force, it will compress or it will internally rotate, or things will swing in towards the midline. So why would we expect in the hardest part of the ascent of a squat for people's knees to move away from the midline? If anything, we would expect things to move in towards the midline to help the body produce force. Bit of an oversimplification. Some people say it's reductionist, but again, like, I really do believe that there's basically two patterns of human movement, and like why we see different representations of it, for lack of a better word, are due to people's unique individual structure and the constraints of the task. But like outside of that, pretty much everything I see is just alternating patterns of flexion, abduction, external rotation, and extension, abduction, internal rotation. It doesn't matter if you're throwing a ball, it doesn't matter if you're sprinting, it doesn't matter if you're doing a low bar back squat. It's just all of it is gait to me. And I think where people get confused, because I've heard gait people say, like, not all movement's gait. It's like, no, not all movement is locomotion. In the way I view things, like movement is gait. And like how I define gait is management of forces, yielding and overcoming. Whereas like locomotion is like, you know, walking around and shit like that. And that is an umbrella. Sits under the umbrella that is gait, as does bench press, as does clean and jerks, as does swinging a fucking golf club, as does throwing objects. It's all just, again, these alternating triads of movement.
And that's like with that, especially with the triple extension thing, there's that, fuck, you could go down a rabbit hole there.
I would love to talk about triple extension being a psyop. Sorry, I need to correct myself here, because when I realized like what I was sort of already thinking and suspecting about triple extension, I was dirtier than when I found out Santa wasn't real, just because of how much I'd been hassled about my technique in weightlifting at various times and other various things. So when is triple extension important in terms of full triple extension? And when do we not give a fuck about triple extension? And sort of what are the trade-offs and how do we explain that continuum? Just let me get some water.
And that, yeah, especially with running, it's like, especially I used to learn it, again, when you learn the biomedical, it's like, no, you got to do triple extension so then you can go run.
Produce the force, right? You got to.
And like, I agree, there are times where you want to train triple extension and the movement pattern of as a maybe a rehab drill or whatever, but even still, and this is where I'm like, it's like there are parts of it, especially ankle stuff, depends in rehab, but at the core of it, and you'll talk about this now, but if triple extension isn't what we're aiming for, why would you train it? It's like, if you just change, and you'll talk about shin angles and everything, but it's like, once you realize movement isn't triple extension, or especially in running in that, you don't want to train that because you're fucking not loading that. Anyway, continue. I know you're going to go on a.
Okay, so the way I see it, one, this whole idea of it being simultaneous triple extension, ankles, knees, and hips. No, it follows a proximal to distal pattern, especially when it's
that's another one.
Really efficiently. It's not simultaneous. It's proximal to distal. That's how we get these whip-like qualities of the body. And there's like structural physiological considerations that in theory explain some aspects of what we're observing there. Whether or not you need to complete your triple extension comes down to the rhythm and the timing constraints of the task. So where I think it's been said that triple extension is really useful, but it's not nearly as useful and can even be a threat to the system, is in Olympic weightlifting and sprinting. And even more so running for field sports. That's a separate conversation for now, though. Let's talk about sprinting. So people are like, triple extension in sprinting is good because you get more force out of each stride and you get a longer stride. And stride length and putting force into the ground is very important, but it's not the only thing that dictates sprinting performance. The other side of that coin is how quickly can you get your leg back out in front of your body and set up a very efficient ground strike. What is an efficient strike at the ground? One where you're hitting the ground and getting that negative foot speed. So hitting the ground with a lot of momentum. Athletes who triple extend too much in sprinting have a tendency to not be able to get their leg back out in front of their body quick enough, and they end up hitting the ground every step like a wet bag of shit, and they can't harness the momentum of really good, efficient, upright running. In weightlifting, there are two different archetypes, and the way I see it. And some weightlifting athletes, like that Bulgarian 18-year-old phenom who's breaking the senior world records, for sure he triple extends hardcore. But then like I can't remember anyway, look at most weightlifters. There's a Georgian 89 kilo guy who's just like finishing his pulls with the softest knees I've ever seen and the flattest feet, and it just really suits my biases. But there are a lot of weightlifters who will finish the pull with soft knees. And again, the most propulsive part of the pull for most of these lifters is the second pull, where they're shin angle changing, and that's when all the hip extension is happening. You're maximizing the contribution of the hip extensors. You get a little bit of knee and ankle extension, but then you're making your way under the bar. By not finishing that triple extension, they're maximizing the amount of time where the bar is traveling up and they're traveling down. So they just look really rapid under the bar. Again, if they and that's the thing, people be like, no, but you'll pull the bar higher if you fully triple extend. But it's not a competition of pulling the bar as high as possible. It's about, same as golf, right? It's not about hitting the ball as hard as possible. It's about hitting it hard to the right fucking spot. Same with Olympic weightlifting. Again, not as technical as golf, but it has those golf-like elements to it. Yeah. What's an example of something where I'm like, just triple extend as hard as possible, high jump. You're landing on a mat. You also have a lot of time to prepare for that, and one, you don't need to. Or like dunking a basketball, like a lot of jumping activities, not continuous jumping, because then you need to cycle. Again, there's probably going to be more. This exists on a spectrum, right? But yeah, when someone's dunking a basketball, it's like, well, yeah, there's not another phase for like 1.5 seconds. And kind of don't care if you perform that phase poorly if you've already dunked the basketball. So who cares? Yeah, triple extend. But on any activity that has heavy timing and rhythm constraints, it's again, proximal and distal like a focus, cycle. Nominal amounts of knee and ankle extension, and that's sort of where you get that rhythm sort of coming from. Because do you go down the Bosch shit? Even like a Darian,
I haven't actually really
David Gray's
read much.
Bill Hartman's talking about it. Franz Bosch, what I have thumbed through of his book, he seems to explain a lot of these concepts. I read it on a plane and then had a heinous Valium-induced sleep after it, so my recollection is hazy. But essentially, what he was saying was like, he looks at like muscle architecture and then makes inferences about like how fast those muscles are capable of firing. And like essentially what he says, I've learned information that contradicts this week about, because the idea is that the glutes are the biggest and strongest one. Typically, the trade-off of not only just big, strong muscles in general, but also just based on like the fiber orientation. He says like the muscle architecture is the glutes need a lot of time to contract. Whereas as you get more distal, those muscles, they can't produce as much force, but they can contract and relax a lot quicker. This really marries up. So by extending hips, knees, and then ankles, you give those bigger, stronger, slower muscles the time that they so desperately need to produce all that force, even in something where the ground contacts are as short as sprinting. You're not spending much time on the ground. Therefore, I guess they're theorizing that it's even more important to buy those strong hip extensors as much time as possible. But this, going back to like, I don't know that what Franz Bosch was saying is true based off muscle architecture, but it matches up with my life experience from music, because our drummer used to get a lot of compliments on how he looked when he played, our first drummer, and he would swing his arms around wildly and people were like, fuck, just looks so cool, man, looks like Travis Barker. But he'd gas out after like 3 songs because he's using pecs and lats. He could bang the drums really hard. His endurance was shit. Think about when you see those marching band guys, the wrists are just rapidly firing and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, the distal muscles can contract and relax a lot quicker, and they've got a lot better endurance. That's the trade-off. More proximal tissues, again, generally speaking, slower, but way stronger.
And this is where, and you kind of beat me to one of the biggest things that I can't remember exactly how I first heard of it, but I most learned about it from you was this. And I, again, 2019 Hayden would fucking froth it. Proximal stability. No. What's the actual saying? Because
proximal stability
equals distal mobility. Yeah. And I was that person, bro. Again, interstellar meme, banging on the thing. I'd be like doing the upside down kettlebells, stabilizing. I'd be doing all this shit to try and improve my bench press, when I just realized if I get in better positions and XYZ, it just happens. So give us your little fucking spiel on this, like why that doesn't make sense. And obviously, like, and the best way I learned it off you and one of your posts a couple of years ago, whenever you did it, was the throwing idea. It's like all this movement is this whip-like thing that it's like you give time for everything to move forward, the big things do it, and then you get this like, ching. Yeah. And same as sprinting as well. So like, how would you describe that in a simple way for a couple of people who have maybe heard it, but are like, fuck, I don't really like get it exactly.
Run, get a good coach who can constrain the environment.
Yeah.
Like, because that's it. Because like, you only really have to think about this stuff, and you only have to coach the shit out of it when you're dealing with people who it's been trained out of. Because so many of the things, especially the complex concepts in terms of movement we've described today, a lot of the best athletes just do naturally, even when their coaches are trying to coach it out of them. So again, a lot of those weightlifters who like have the soft pull at the top, I guarantee you they had coaches who were like, finish your pull, finish your pull, finish your pull. But then at a certain point, the coach just shut the fuck up because they're like, this is my best athlete. I'm just gonna fucking let him do what he does, and I'll just pay attention to the other kids. This guy doesn't need me. I'm just along for the ride here. But then when you're dealing with someone who has got so in their head, they've coached it out of them. You got to enter some highly constrained environments.
Yeah, and like even I learned
creative, because manipulating an environment and constraining it can be very hard, especially when you're trying to solve different problems.
And that's one of the things, especially with like, and again, even this one probably a couple years ago was like, nah, external cues are better because they're not thing, and internal cues aren't as good. But it's like, you can fucking give everyone cues, but if the constraint if they have a certain constraint, you're not going to cue them out of it. Yeah. The best example I heard recently was the D-cell one. Have you heard the D-cell one with the knees? No. So it's just an example of like, if you don't have the knee extensor strength and the ability to produce a lot amount of torque with your knee extensors, you can cue someone to bend their knee, slow down as quick as they can on a D-cell, but they will physically not fucking do it because that's the constraint. So you can yell at them, bend your knees, load the knee, etc., slow down quick, sprint fast, stop. But if they don't have the physical ability to do it, you can't cue them out of it. You can't say, no, just bend more.
Jack Edwards says it about sprinting all the time. People will look at the best sprinters and try to mimic their technique, but your running technique, your technique in pretty much everything, is a byproduct of your physical qualities, not your intentions. You know, all the intentions you want. As soon as you're in a high stress scenario, you find out what your physical qualities look like. And because again, like I just jerk it to Marcel Jacobs vids, but again, I don't have the physical qualities of Marcel Jacobs.
I was the same as sprinting. Like when I was doing and I was training, and I'm lucky I just started learning about that stuff before then, but I learned all these cues when I'd work with Whiten or Bateman and stuff, and I'd be like, cues. Oh, they're not doing it. It must just be I didn't explain the cue. I need a better cue. And then I'm lucky that back then I kind of started grasping the idea of it all. And now I'm obviously like, that's the way I think, is just constraints, and you can't cue someone out of one. Yeah. But I'd be like, why isn't even my early sprinting? It's like, why can't someone run like this or load like this, or why can't they, etc., whatever? But it's like, it's not the cue of whip from the ground or whip from the hip. It's not the cue of that. It's that they're maybe not strong enough, or they don't have the mobility, or they don't have. And once you change that, even in your weightlifting, you'd see you can cue someone to do whatever, but unless they can actually do that, it's pointless. You know what I mean? That's probably where GPP came in for you.
The only thing is potentially like some people misunderstand the task. I think that's the only thing where then all of a sudden words can very efficiently improve the
100%.
quality of movement. If you like, because again, like I relate it to like a snatch, like your understanding of like what you're actually trying to do when you're snatching changes over time, because it's one of the most complicated things you can do with a barbell. And like, that is something where like words outside of the immediately before the set, that's conversations around training, like improving their understanding of what they're trying to do. That sounds a bit esoteric. That can help them express their physical qualities with a bit more intentionality. But like, again, the most of it is body's trying to do the task, spending as fewer calories as possible.
Exactly. That was like the extra point to it that I heard, was like, fixing a constraint doesn't automatically mean they're going to be good at it. It just actually gives you the ability to then explain the drill, and they can then, once they understand it, they have the physical ability to do it. And that's kind of the thing people miss.
And this is where you can criticize the way someone's moving, not in a harsh way, but just like, you could do this better, when you can tell that like their hindbrain doesn't understand the task. It's like, I'm trying to isolate a glute, And in an unconstrained environment, as that glute gets closer to failure, other muscles are going to try to pick up the slack because your amygdala doesn't understand why you would ever want to isolate a glute. It's like, no, if I just use everything, the task gets easier, man. Like, what are you doing to me? Like,
stop spending energy. I need to live.
Sort of. So prefrontal cortex can process it, but like, amygdala is the thing. Movements happening all throughout the fucking CNS, But again, it's definitely not emerging primarily from the prefrontal cortex. That's where you're processing the words, which, like I said, can trickle through. But
100%. And that's the thing. It's like once you learn that, and it's like you could just obviously explain it, but then, like you said, the energy thing. It's like we literally are designed to do as much as we can with as little energy as possible to stay alive.
Basically it.
And it's just like, there you go, podcast done. Sweet. There you go, everyone. There's your info.
Calories in, calories out.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, calories in.
Evidence-based fat loss PTs. You try to get away from it, but where do you come? Back to calories.
Yeah, literally. Fuck me. What else? Social media. That was and your business stuff, and you were talking about all that. Like, more just where are you heading? Like that was the only other thing I was going to pick your brain about, and people would be interested in is obviously you're talking about you doing your seminars and your GPP and that, and you were saying you started enjoying it more. What have you kind of started enjoying more about that and diving down the rabbit hole?
I used to get really offended when people were like, oh, I understand what you're doing with your brand. It's just a part of your brand. Because I was like, no, this is me expressing myself authentically. Whereas now I have GPP. And like, I understand that that's still a brand. Like, you can't escape it. But as far as like intentionally creating a brand that is GPP, like I used to be someone who like rolled their eyes when people talk about the core values of their brand, but then here I find myself proudly beating my chest about this thing. I'm like, oh, this is what it's like when you like hand pick an idea that you're passionate about, and it resonates with, again, like the way you see the world and the things that you think need to happen. And yeah, I'm sucking down that business Kool-Aid because, again, historically, some of my more controversial content has been around slamming business coaches, and people have been like, fuck, yeah, we're going to have a big business. And now I find myself just like engaging with business in a way that I never have. Again, off the back of, again, it's such a cliche. I remember people would tell me like, Angus, you'd be good at sales when you truly believe in what you're selling. And then here I fucking am, like my heart and soul. I'm like, the world needs to be training more variously. Like, we need GPP. And yeah, like I'm sort of just going deeper and even Jacob works for GPP because he understands the core values of the brand. Like, some of the biggest pieces of content that have resonated the most with our audience have been things where I've had no input. I wake up and it's just filled my WhatsApp with these memes, and I'm like, I picked the right guy. I couldn't have anyone else.
That's like me with Mitch.
Fucking brand.
It's so, bro, he posted a meme and it's like one of them got like fucking all these shares and views and shit. And I was like, that wasn't even me. That was Mitch. And I was like, because you know where I learned how to get Mitch, not learned how to get Mitch, but you know where I got the idea to hire Mitch was your podcast with David Gray. And you were like, it was a couple of years ago, I was listening to it. I can actually remember I was fucking listening to it, or started last year anyway. And you were like, oh, I'm just getting into the hiring thing. And I think you were saying you were worried about like hiring someone and teaching him everything or whatever.
And then go back and listen to that. Yeah.
Bro, it was fucking spot on. David literally said, you'll find them in your mentorship.
I think it actually happened the month I was, because Jamie Smith said the same thing. And I literally, this was like, even once I realized it was him, I didn't take him on for another 6 months, but it was literally the week after I asked this question that stumps everyone in the mentorship. I don't want to spoil it because it's still one of my favorite bits of the mentorship. And Jacob answered one correctly, but there was just no hesitation. Normally I ask this question and there's just radio silence. Like,
fuck, I want to know the question now. Tell me off camera.
Like, this is there's like stumped people at seminars and stuff like that. Like, they'd be like, all right, everyone go on break. I need to think about this. And he's not the only person who's got it. Anna Wish actually got it as well. But yeah, Jacob just...
I need to know this question.
This is fucking it. And I was just like, here's the one.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. And it's like, David said it, and you were like, yeah, whatever. And then Mitch joined my first round, and he actually ended up doing 2 rounds because he loved it so much. And then we just ended up having these massive chats, and I was like, fuck, this. We're like, this is the same person.
It's
just
cliche, like, isn't it? It's cringe.
It is,
cliche it is,
bro. It is, bro.
Like...
We have the same ideas, the same like the same principles of movement, like. he did the post yesterday, one of the carousel posts. And I replied, I was like, that is something like I would write. I'm like, did I forget I wrote this? Because he worded it, and I was just like, this makes it so much easier. And it's like, obviously with the brand thing, but that's one of the things, and obviously you always disagree with people. That's like healthy. One of the things, you always used to post this, and I'd be like, and because if people came into my mentorship and I explained the ways I did things, I'd be like, one of them was like, oh, but Angus Bradley said, it was when you were like, not this, yeah, the sales calls. And I was like, yeah, but I think he's explaining it in a way that's like, you shouldn't try to sell someone. And my description, and I can see it now, and you're probably getting into this if, I don't know, depending on what you're doing with businesses, sales calls are more just strategy calls, are more to see if someone's good to work with you. And I always say to people, I'll never work on someone's objections, because at the core of it, at the end of the day, if you have to convince someone to work with you,
It'll be punished.
I've had them before. Yeah. It's like the 80-20 rule.
Friction slows you down. You need people who understand you and where it is a good fit, because it is so frictionless. It's night and day. You're like, oh, you get some clients, you're like, I could handle 50 of this client. And then you have other clients, you're like, 2 of these would derail my whole business.
You're describing, yeah, I was at that point, started this year. There's like 2 or 3 clients who are like, I need more of these. They pay what I ask. They do what I say. They don't constantly message me just to talk to me. They upload the videos, and then when I say your block's up, they go, yeah, let's do another one.
Yeah.
I'm
way too chill with my onboarding still. Like I have a very tight roster of online clients, and I let someone slip in even recently. I didn't sack him yesterday. I was just like, they weren't even rude. They just weren't engaged. I'm like, man, like.
But how'd you sack them? Like, was it just I've never had to sack someone. Like,
but from a place of love, I was like, man, like this isn't a productive coaching relationship. Like,
oh, actually, I've done that.
Good
yeah.
Intentions when you came in, like, and I apologize as well, because I'm like, I didn't vet this from the start, and now this is why we're having this awkward conversation. And I want you to know it's not just lip service. I'm saying to you genuinely that this was my fault, not in this bitter way, like it's my fault, but like, be like, hey man, I really wish you luck on your training journey. If you want recommendations, maybe I can give you a couple, but you need to lift your game a little bit before I refer you to a friend. But yeah, like all the best. And typically I'll refund them just for that last week, just more for my own thing. Be like, send them all over, hey, have a bit of that cash back sort of thing, but don't have to deal with it too much. Because my roster of 1-to-1 clients is one elite, but then also well,
it's like the 80-20 rule. It's like 80% of your headaches come from 20% of your clients. Yeah. And that's when I started being like, wait, I actually don't just want to take on everyone. I actually want to make sure they're good and make sure they say the right things and they got the same values. And then I hop on a call with them. And when it's like that objection thing, you don't want to have to convince people, fucking oath. But it's like, you still want to be able to have a chat or something. And obviously now you're diving down that rabbit hole, and you'll see. And
here's my thing. I act like I'm real chill in the onboarding process, but I'm actually not. I need you working like a well-oiled machine, like having that sheet filled in, communicating with me openly, like they're not chasing you up for shit and stuff like that. But I don't have the balls to say any of that in the onboarding process. So I just required the correct people to come, and I'm so lucky that they have come. But again, like it's very much a learning process that I am still going through to this day. It's like, oh, no, you're not chill. Be upfront about that in the onboarding process. Be like, hey, I'm a very emotional person, and I lose my shit if I don't hear from you from a week. Sorry, I won't like abuse someone, but like, yeah, I get very emotional about that. Like, I need you to be proactively contacting me. Like, I know you're paying me for a service, but there's still a lot of duties that you have. And I used to shy away from explaining how much work they had to do just to pay me to coach them. Now, like I said, I'm just starting to get comfortable with that now. That's not a big part of my business, but yeah, it's I don't think a lot of people have that issue specifically. I think a lot of people have the life sucked out of them by, like I said, just continuing to train these people that they should never have onboarded in the first place. So whether it's 100%. Just growing a pair and learning when it's genuinely productive for both of you to end a client relationship proactively, or to have more of a wall up with your onboarding process and stuff like that. But again, that's all a luxury to have. Like, you have to be in abundance in terms of like lead generation to even have those options. So
are you starting, is it when you talk about all your business stuff, are you more going into like learning the marketing now, or are you also looking at like hiring people?
Being deliberate with my social media strategy, not just like machine gunning out hot takes just because it's fun. And actually being conscious about what the purpose behind each post is. So again, I'm just doing what I've always done on my Angus Bradley page. But when you look at GPP, there are some posts that are purely just meant to laugh. Whereas like on my main page, even when I was making memes, I was always trying to educate. Whereas this is, I'll post content that is designed to make people laugh. I'll have other content where the intention of it is to educate. And with either of those, they could be targeted at either really shareable, potentially viral stuff to grow the brand and get new eyeballs on it, or education or inside jokes for people who are already engaged to make them feel more about the club and just to give them more value. Because again, the way I think we share a common belief about content creation and e-commerce, where it's an extension of the gym floor. You get clients in real life by giving people value for free, and eventually they ask you to train them. And it's the same thing in the online space. It's just a lower trust environment, so the courting process is longer. I think on average, I show people, I make them laugh and make them think for about 6 months before they engage with a product or service. Whereas like most people are like, they go on a content streak for like 2 months, get one viral reel, and they're like, job's done. I'm like, those people are literally never going to see one of your posts again.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Because when I started with Mitch, I was saying, I literally do not give a fuck about the likes you get or what you do. Just let's start the pottery, start making lots of posts and then we won't see an uptrend in income or clients for probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Crazy.
And the best thing is Mitch went, yes, sweet, all right, done. And now he just like post a night, bang, meme a night, post Carouser. And it's just like, that's where it comes then in 6 months. You're like, oh, we're starting to pick up. And it's like, then you attribute it to like one post you did, and then you think that's the fucking post. So
my butt clenches every time I approach this conversation, the mentorship still just being like, fuck, I hope there was no one here that thought this was a 2-month job. I just tell them it's a 6 month to 2 year process. If you want to develop a truly like business that meets your needs, doesn't suck the life out of you, and that like genuinely has something to offer, and you're not just there like Oliver Twist with your hand out, like actually showing up to give value to people and stuff like that, and like being excited, not about the sales that you're making, but being excited about, and it's a cliche, the impact.
Yeah.
Like, teach people for free. Not coaching actively, but like give people information that'll improve their training sessions. You will have people hitting you up or buying your products.
But
like
even,
people don't do it for long enough because, and here's the thing, like everyone wants the online business, but there's this attitude where it's acceptable to grind away at the face-to-face thing for years, whereas people won't grind away for you. And again, it's a bit more of a crapshoot. There are inconsistencies, algorithm, like the core of the truth is the same. You have to have the balls to be like, I am willing to take social media seriously, because I think that was a big point of shame for a lot of quote unquote legit trainers when I was getting into the field. They'd be like, oh, legit trainers, don't worry about that Instagram thing. I'm like, well, delete your Instagram account. And every day you don't delete your Instagram account for fitness is admitting that I'm right, that it is an integral part of letting people
100%.
you know you're a legit coach. And it's not the world that I romanticized when I got into the industry, but it's a fucking reality. If you want to have an impact, you you churn out social media content. It's just, there's some, what is it? What does Keir always say? The man who acknowledges reality the best is the one who will win.
Yeah. He was my mentor for 2 or 3 months. And even he, like, it's amazing what a man, it's just like, do this, do that, do this. I was like, oh, like, okay, yes. And then you see it and you're like, wow, like once you acknowledge certain things, and like, even I've taken this approach now, is like, when I was guilty when I first started, and I one of my ice video got like 3 million views. And I was like, oh, yep, that's me done. Thank you.
Treat yourself to a week off content.
But I didn't have nothing in the back end. I had no product, no proper thing. I wasn't giving as much. I still gave a lot of value because I was still growing, but I wasn't doing. But now I'm like, wait a minute, like, expectations. This is probably what makes it harder sometimes than it needs to be, because I'm expecting, again, expectations we talked about. But it's like now it's like, even my solo templates, I had them as like $100, $180 things for like my proper. Now I'm like, I was talking to Angus, and that was one of the things we did, $17. You go get 12 weeks on an app for $17 and just fucking go train. If you like it, and then you're like, oh, I want to do more with you, let me know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's it. It's like,
but worst case,
a little bit, over deliver on value, they will engage again.
But even if they don't,
satisfying that end of the equation, did you give them more value than what they gave you? Which honestly isn't that hard to do. If you set things up well, you can give people these very rewarding customer journeys.
Yeah, but even then, it's like, even if they don't, I'm doing what did you say? The impact. No, the impact. And because now people, even if they use me for it and everyone goes and buys a $17 template and just trains that and fucks me off, I am showing them how to train better. And so it's like, it's a win-win. I'm like, that guy posted a question. He's like, I don't know how you're making money on these. I'm like, I'm fucking not.
Yeah.
It's $17 for a fucking program. It's people try and charge $200 for one. But it's like, I'm actually helping. It's like a weird thing. People are like, wait, you're not making money out of this? Well, why are you doing it then? It's like, it's like,
the most rewarding thing I've ever had happen was just being able to fly to the other side of the planet, go into a random gym and just see someone roll out of a set of gar hammers and then drop straight down into a squat curl. And I was just like, wow, it's real.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Cool.
Yeah, like even one of my people, like old clients, I moved all my clients on, but he said like last year, I posted like a rear delt row. And he said, I'm caught up with him the other day when I was in Canberra, and he said that week, everyone in the gym was doing them. And I was just like, wait, what? Really? He was like, every row machine was people doing rear delt rows. And I was like, oh, damn. I was like,
the other thing is, people shit on that. They're like, oh, everyone's just doing all the new exercise variations they see on Instagram.
Like, that's the fucking point.
Heaven forbid people get G'd up about exercise.
I know.
Like, for fuck's sake. Like,
yeah, like having to
derail your whole program and use rear delt fly variation. Like, relax.
Literally, it's like fucking that. That's the whole point of me posting the fucking video, is because this is a better variation to do that's easier. And people are like, oh, look, you're making everyone. I'm like, you fucking, we'll go down a rabbit hole for hours with this shit.
And I think you probably arrived at this conclusion as well. Not everyone's going to get it. And that's okay. And some people need more time to get it. So you just got to play it out in front of them and be like, you like this now? You like where this is going? Like
even I see myself year to year, like not year to year, but like especially in the past year, was like, I feel so much different about things now. Like I don't get triggered. I'm like, I can tell people that static stretching shit and foam rolling doesn't do whatever. People, I can't change them. And at the end of the day, I'm just getting triggered, being like, no, don't roll. Obviously, I'm still going to do it to bait people and get the engagement. But if I actually think I'm going to fucking change that by doing that, I'm naive and I'm an idiot. And I'm just going to fucking stress myself out. Now, someone says they do it. I'm like, oh, fuck, whatever. People still send me videos of like the best strong thing. I'm like, please don't send me this. Like, I'm not going to go do every single one. Like, I'm not changing the world with it. But if one person is like, I don't do it anymore, I'm like, yes. Yeah. I'm like, I did it.
Sometimes you just got to focus on the good stuff that's getting posted as well. Like, that's how you keep your mental health. You're like, oh, there's some really awesome stuff out there.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and even that's what I'm like. Even with you, David, fucking, so many people. You just like, oh, they're actually posting good shit, and then your mental health's like, oh. But no, that's about it. Anything? Where can people find you? Where can they drink the Angus Bradley Kool-Aid? Where can they get stuff and learn about you? And what do you got on?
All right. So if you're a personal trainer, I recommend you follow me at Angus Bradley 92. If you're just an athlete and you're interested in training more variously, I recommend you follow General Physical Preparation. Go make some sick t-shirts as well. Got some sick t-shirts coming out. I probably shouldn't talk about it because it's a little bit too far out, but I don't like to make moves in silence. So
yeah, I'm the same. Everyone's like, do it and then talk about it. But I'm like, the neurodivergent brothers can't hold themselves back. But no, thank you. I'm about to find out what that fucking question was. So we'll keep it a secret.
All right.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Finally. It's out.